In this episode, we focus on confidentiality, the security goal that is easiest to describe and often hardest to protect consistently because it depends on people, processes, and technology all behaving well at the same time. Confidentiality is about keeping information from being seen by people who are not authorized to see it. And the reason it matters is simple. Once sensitive information is exposed, you cannot unexpose it. You can rotate passwords, rebuild servers, and restore backups, but you cannot make leaked data forget its way into screenshots, inboxes, and copied files. That permanence is why leak response and breach reporting are not side topics. They are central to protecting confidentiality in the real world. We are also going to talk about encryption as a protective layer, not as a magic spell, and we will connect it to the most uncomfortable category of confidentiality events, privileged data breaches, where the most sensitive data or the most powerful access is involved. The goal is to help you think clearly under pressure, because Security X scenarios often test whether you can choose the right actions when information might already be slipping out the door. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Confidentiality begins with a basic question that beginners sometimes skip because it feels obvious. What information is actually sensitive in this organization? If you cannot answer that, you cannot protect it, because protection requires prioritization and clear boundaries. Sensitive information can include customer data, employee data, financial data, health records, intellectual property, authentication secrets, and internal strategy documents, and not all of those are equally sensitive or equally regulated. The exam tends to reward thinking that starts with classification, even if the question does not say the word classification, because classification is how an organization decides what deserves stronger controls. Once data is classified, you can apply rules about who may access it, where it may be stored, how it may be transmitted, and how long it may be retained. A common beginner misunderstanding is assuming confidentiality is purely about stopping hackers, when many leaks are caused by misdirected emails, misconfigured storage, and overshared access inside the organization. When you treat confidentiality as a program of controlling where data lives and who can touch it, you reduce the risk of both external theft and internal accidents. As soon as you decide what is sensitive, the next step is to understand where that data flows, because leaks usually happen at the seams where data moves between systems and people. Data flows include storage, sharing, processing, backups, logs, exports, and integrations with third parties, and each flow is a chance for a copy to be created outside the place you intended. Beginners often picture data as sitting in one database, but real organizations spread data across file shares, SaaS platforms, tickets, chat systems, and personal devices, sometimes without realizing it. Confidentiality protection is therefore partly a visibility challenge. You need enough awareness to know which systems contain sensitive data and which roles routinely handle it. This is also where least privilege becomes practical, because least privilege is not an abstract slogan. It is the discipline of giving people only the access they need for their job, for only as long as they need it. When you understand data flows, you can reduce the number of places sensitive data exists, which reduces the number of opportunities for exposure. Security X questions often hint at this by describing data that ended up in an unexpected place, and the best answers typically involve reducing unnecessary data movement and tightening access patterns. A major part of confidentiality protection is recognizing that not all leaks look like a dramatic breach headline, because many are quiet, partial, or ambiguous at first. A leak can be an accidental public share, a file uploaded to the wrong location, a misconfigured cloud bucket, a database snapshot copied into a test environment, or a report exported and stored on an unmanaged device. It can also be a deliberate exfiltration, where an attacker steals data slowly to avoid detection, or where an insider takes data for personal gain. The first moments of leak response are often about uncertainty, meaning you do not know how much data is involved, whether it was actually accessed, or whether the exposure is still active. Beginners sometimes think the first step is to start investigating every detail, but leak response usually starts by controlling the exposure so it stops getting worse. That might mean disabling a share, revoking access, pausing an integration, or removing a file from a public location, while preserving enough evidence to understand what happened. The exam likes this sequencing because it reflects a mature priority: stop the bleeding, then learn the full story, then take long-term corrective actions. Leak response also depends on careful thinking about evidence, because a response that destroys evidence can make it harder to prove what was exposed and harder to meet reporting obligations later. Evidence can include access logs, sharing histories, system events, audit trails, and timestamps, and these clues help you determine whether data was merely exposed or actually accessed. A beginner mistake is treating exposure and access as the same thing, because they are different. Exposure means the door was open. Access means someone walked through it. Sometimes you cannot prove access happened, and that uncertainty influences how you communicate and what remedial steps you take. That is why mature leak response includes both containment and documentation, meaning you record what you found, what you changed, and when you changed it, so you can reconstruct events later. This matters because leadership, legal teams, and regulators may ask for a timeline, and you cannot create a timeline reliably if the only record is someone's memory. In Security X-style scenarios, answers that reflect disciplined evidence handling and timeline awareness often beat answers that jump directly to long-term changes without first capturing what happened. Privileged data breaches require special attention because they combine two dangerous things: high-value information and high-power access. Privileged data often includes secrets like encryption keys, credential vault contents, database administrative access, sensitive customer datasets, and internal system configurations that reveal security controls. When privileged access is compromised, an attacker may not need to break into each system individually, because privileged access can open multiple doors at once. Beginners sometimes assume that a breach is defined by the attacker stealing data directly, but a privileged breach can also be about the attacker gaining the ability to steal data on demand, which changes the risk even if you cannot confirm how much was taken. This is why identity and access management matters so much for confidentiality. It is often easier to steal access than to crack encryption. A mature program limits privileged access, monitors it closely, and ensures privileged actions are traceable, because privileged misuse can look like normal administrative activity if you are not watching carefully. Security X questions may describe unusual administrative behavior, sudden new accounts, or unexpected data exports, and the right response often includes treating that as a privileged incident with higher urgency and stricter containment. When confidentiality is at stake, reporting becomes a security control in its own right, not just a paperwork obligation, because reporting forces clarity, accountability, and timely communication. Reporting includes internal reporting, meaning escalating to the right leaders and teams, and external reporting, meaning notifying affected parties or regulators when required. Beginners sometimes think reporting is simply admitting failure, but a mature view is that reporting is how you limit harm by enabling coordinated action. If a breach affects customers, timely notification can help them protect themselves. If a breach affects partners, timely notification can prevent the spread of the problem across interconnected systems. Internally, reporting ensures that decisions about containment, investigation, and communication are made by the right people, not improvised by whoever found the problem first. The exam often tests reporting indirectly by asking what to do next after discovering a leak, and the best answers frequently include escalation according to incident response procedures and legal requirements. This is also where accuracy matters, because careless reporting can create panic or legal exposure, while delayed reporting can create harm and noncompliance. A disciplined approach is to share confirmed facts, identify what is still unknown, and commit to updates as investigation continues. One of the most important misunderstandings beginners have about confidentiality is assuming encryption alone prevents leaks, because encryption helps, but only when it is applied correctly and when keys are protected. Encryption is the transformation of readable data into unreadable data unless the correct key is used, and it is valuable because it can reduce the impact of theft or loss of storage media. Encryption can protect data at rest, like data stored on disks or databases, and data in transit, like data moving across networks. For data in transit, transport layer security, TLS, is commonly used to protect connections so that an attacker intercepting traffic cannot easily read it. For data at rest, organizations often use standardized algorithms, and advanced encryption standard, AES, is a common example of a symmetric algorithm used for strong encryption in many systems. The exam does not require you to implement these, but it does expect you to understand the purpose. Encryption reduces exposure when data is stolen from storage or intercepted in transit. The limitation is that if an attacker obtains the keys, or if access controls allow legitimate decryption by the wrong person, encryption will not save you, because the system will decrypt data for whoever has authorized access. Key management is therefore the quiet heart of encryption, and it is also where many confidentiality failures hide. Keys are the secrets that unlock encrypted data, and if keys are stored insecurely, shared too widely, or managed casually, encryption becomes a false comfort. Beginners often picture keys as a file sitting somewhere, but in mature environments, key storage and usage are controlled, monitored, and limited so that a compromise of one account does not automatically expose everything. Good key management includes limiting who can access keys, separating duties so no single person has unchecked power, rotating keys when needed, and logging key usage so suspicious access can be detected. Key management also includes knowing which data is encrypted with which keys, because recovery and incident response require that visibility. A privileged data breach becomes especially serious if it involves access to key material, because an attacker with keys can decrypt data at scale, including data that might have been safely unreadable if only the encrypted files were stolen. Security X scenarios sometimes hint at this by describing stolen backups or database dumps, and the best answer often includes assessing whether encryption was applied and whether keys were protected separately from the data. Confidentiality protection also relies on preventing accidental leakage, which is often where program controls like data loss prevention, DLP, become relevant as a concept. DLP is not a single tool you buy and forget. It is the idea of monitoring and controlling how sensitive data leaves controlled environments, whether through email, uploads, removable media, printing, or cloud sharing. The reason this matters is that many leaks happen through normal channels, like someone attaching the wrong file or copying data into an unapproved system for convenience. DLP approaches can detect patterns like sensitive identifiers or classified documents and can block, warn, or log those actions, depending on policy. For beginners, the key is understanding the balance. Confidentiality controls must reduce risk without making work impossible, or people will find workarounds. That is why policies, training, and clear workflows matter, because technical controls are strongest when they align with human behavior instead of fighting it. On the exam, a scenario might describe repeated accidental disclosures, and the best response often combines clearer handling rules with controls that reduce the chance of an accidental send, rather than relying solely on reminders and hope. Another important part of confidentiality is managing privileged data breaches with speed and discipline, because privileged compromise can expand quickly. When privileged access is suspected, containment often includes revoking or disabling access, rotating credentials, and limiting session tokens, while ensuring that core business operations can still function. That need for continuity is what makes the situation tricky, because shutting everything down might stop data loss, but also stop the business. A mature response uses scope control, meaning you isolate what is risky without breaking everything unnecessarily, and you document changes so you can track what was done and reverse temporary measures safely later. Investigation focuses on what actions the privileged account performed, what systems it touched, and whether new access paths were created, like new accounts, new permissions, or new integrations. The exam tends to reward answers that recognize privileged incidents as high impact and therefore requiring both containment and follow-up verification, because a privileged attacker may leave persistence behind. A common beginner mistake is to rotate one password and assume the problem is solved, while the attacker still has other access paths. A stronger approach treats privileged breach response as closing doors, checking for hidden doors, and then monitoring for attempts to reopen them. Leak response also includes communication discipline, because confidentiality incidents create strong emotions and strong pressure to speak quickly. Internally, you want clear, consistent updates so teams do not duplicate work or work at cross purposes. Externally, you want messages that are accurate, respectful, and aligned with legal requirements and organizational values, without oversharing details that could worsen the situation. Beginners sometimes assume the technical team should decide what to disclose, but in most organizations, disclosure decisions involve security, legal, privacy, and leadership working together because the consequences include legal exposure, customer trust, and regulatory obligations. Communication also needs to consider the risk of secondary attacks, because attackers sometimes exploit breach news by sending phishing messages that pretend to be official notifications. A mature response anticipates that and provides safe guidance, like how recipients can verify real communications and what channels will be used. Security X questions may frame this as reporting and notification, and the best answers often involve following documented escalation paths and coordinating communications rather than improvising in the moment. When communication is disciplined, it reduces harm and reduces the chance that the incident turns into a broader crisis of trust. Encryption and reporting also meet in an important way that Security X likes to test, which is the difference between data being exposed and data being readable. If encrypted data is stolen but the keys remain protected and access cannot be achieved, the impact can be reduced, though the incident may still require response and sometimes reporting depending on laws and contracts. Beginners sometimes assume encryption always eliminates reporting obligations, but obligations vary, and organizations must often evaluate the specific context. The exam expects you to understand the logic rather than the details of any one law. If the confidentiality of sensitive data is likely compromised, reporting becomes more urgent, while strong protective measures like encryption can influence the severity and the response. This is why evidence and investigation matters so much, because you need to know whether keys were exposed, whether decrypted access occurred, and whether data was actually accessed. A mature program also avoids relying on encryption as the only control by combining it with access control, logging, and monitoring, because confidentiality is protected best by layers. When you understand that encryption reduces risk but does not remove the need for disciplined response, you can choose exam answers that reflect realism rather than wishful thinking. A final beginner challenge is understanding that confidentiality is not only about outsiders stealing data, but also about preventing the organization from accidentally leaking itself through over-collection and over-retention. The more data you collect, the more you can leak, and the longer you retain it, the larger the breach can become. Mature confidentiality programs therefore pay attention to retention schedules, secure disposal, and minimizing unnecessary data copies. This is not just a privacy topic. It is a security topic because it reduces the size of the target. When data is no longer needed, securely disposing of it reduces future exposure. When logs and backups contain sensitive data, they must be protected with the same seriousness as primary datasets, because attackers often target backups and logs as a shortcut to high-value information. Security X scenarios sometimes point to backups, exports, or old archives being exposed, and the best answer often includes improving retention controls and protecting secondary data stores. This approach also makes incident response easier because you have fewer uncontrolled copies to hunt down during a crisis. When you treat data lifecycle as part of confidentiality, you build a program that is less brittle and less likely to be surprised by forgotten data stores. As we wrap up, protecting confidentiality is about preventing exposure, limiting access, and responding intelligently when exposure happens anyway. Because even strong programs must be ready for mistakes and attacks. Leak response starts with controlling the exposure, preserving evidence, and building a reliable timeline so decisions and reporting can be grounded in facts rather than panic. Privileged data breaches are especially dangerous because high-power access can turn one compromise into many, so mature responses emphasize rapid containment, credential and access cleanup, and careful verification that hidden access paths were not left behind. Reporting is not merely a compliance step, but a coordination control that ensures the right people act at the right time and that affected parties receive timely, accurate information. Encryption is a powerful layer that can reduce impact when data is stolen or intercepted, but it depends on strong key management, and it does not replace access control, monitoring, and disciplined response. When you connect these ideas together, confidentiality becomes a system of layered protections and practice decisions, not a single product or a single rule. Security X questions reward this integrated mindset because it demonstrates you can protect sensitive information both before and after an incident, which is exactly what real security programs are expected to do.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.